Good afternoon, this is Jim Whitehead, and today I'm all power group in Phoenix Animal, and the topic for today is Custer's last stand. As you know, unfortunately, during our early history, we kind of were doing everything to try to take over in the West, and this is Montana, for example, the Indians' lands. This was their land, and it should have been where we worked out something peacefully and fairly to ensure that we could work with the local inhabitants, but also not have it where we have these battles. And I think we're learning throughout history, generally speaking, battles don't make sense. So, okay, now you're seeing there is Lieutenant Custer. And, it's like one of those things where you go, maybe you should have stayed home that day, but not really. So anyway, Custer's last stand refers to the Battle of Little Bighorn, fought on June 25th and 26th, 1876 in Montana Territory. So Lieutenant Colonel George Armstrong Custer and about 210 men of the U.S. 7th Cavalry were surrounded and defeated by a much larger force of, and we'll tell you that in a way. And again, that's pushing the logic of, certainly there was a lot of land out west at that time that you would say, hey, let's work out a sharing, work together. They know this land, they can help us. I mean, I've always been, and I get a little uptight here and there, but I've always been, honey versus molasses, and work with people, because usually it works out. And if you can't work with someone, don't get into a battle with them. What's the point? So anyway, they were defeated by a larger force. There's Custer again. And I know some of the images, younger, older, that type of thing. But we had where, in this case, we had the Indians that were being commanded by Sitting Bull, and there you see Sitting Bull, and Crazy Horse. How would you like to be called Crazy Horse? But anyway, what we found that the makeup of the Indian force were made up of Lakota Sioux, and there's a representation of that team, Northern Cheyenne, and the Arapaho warriors led by these two chiefs that I mentioned, Sitting Bull and Crazy Horse. I've been called crazy, but not a horse yet. Anyway, the battle ended in the complete destruction of Custer's immediate command. None survived. It became one of the most famous clashes of the Great Sioux War, symbolizing Native resistance against the U.S. expansion and the tragic course of westward conquest. And again, I just have to stress that, this didn't have to be warlike. It didn't, in the sense they lost 210 men on the, the Union side, or the those that were kind of invading this territory. And, they might say, well, in the next battle, we brought in much more, and that was that and that and that. But, I know it'd be like, well, maybe we shouldn't have done the first battle in the first place. So, anyway, they're another group of warriors. And, God bless them. They're fighting for their land. They're fighting for their people. They've lived on this land, hunted on this land, protected this land for years and years and years and years. So I wouldn't even, and it's not that you're trying to take sides, but I would still say they were there first, and it could have been where we worked out something logically benefiting both the non-Indians and the Indians. Real simple. I mean, I know I'm maybe oversimplifying it, but bottom line, it's with Custer's Last Stand, other than being a noteworthy title of a kind of a very terrible battle, there's nothing really where you'd say that accomplished all heck of a lot, other than losing a lot of lives. And the whole thing with any of these, I'm an animal guy. I mean, I love people, but I love animals. And, these horses, and we're going to talk about Comanche in a little bit. That was Custer's wonderful horse. They basically, they didn't ask to do this, but they did their best. They really did their best. So it wouldn't be, the Custer's men had problems because of the horses. No. It's because they were unprepared. There's quite a force. And again, the different tribes knew this area better than Custer's group, and were kind of preparing that they knew that the white man was trying to encroach upon their territory. And as things went generally, we would have a tendency, if we took over land, one, not necessarily, helping the people of the land we were taking care of, or paying for the land, or doing things that would kind of work out as a relationship and working together. So anyway, now you're seeing, this is Comanche, and this is Custer's wonderful horse. Now, other than surviving and being injured, Comanche did not leave. Now, that is a tribute beyond tributes to a wonderful horse. And this is not taking away from any of the other horses, but Comanche did his best to help Custer, and he even stayed on site where, really, you'd think, wouldn't the horse, and you wouldn't think that bad of the horse if the horse said, I think I better leave, because I don't think this is going to be, it's not working out real well, and I'm not going to save anybody, and maybe I need to save myself. But Comanche obviously did not look at it this way. And what we find with most animals, this is why I just love animals, that they're loyal. Right from any animals I've dealt with, and of course my little Jamie, the 10-year-old Shih Tzu, she is there for you. She loves you, and she would never leave you behind if she had a way of leaving. So we, of course, try to make sure that she has a good life, because she deserves it as much as Comanche. And when I get to, and this is relatively short today, but there's a good ending to this, other than the loss of other horses, loss of all the Custer's men. There's another picture of Comanche, and as you can see, there aren't a lot of horses that survived. And that's one of those terrible things to say, well, the horses didn't want to be in this or didn't ask to be in this, and they ended up perishing. And I know life goes on, but I still have to just feel that it'd be nice if this didn't happen. Now, Comanche, the horse who survived the battle of the Little Bighorn, in 1868, the U.S. Army purchased a Mustang Morgan mix horse who would later become known as Comanche. He was sturdy, strong, and unusually calm under fire. Now, I just can't say enough about this. You know, the horse is saying, I do what my master tells me. This certainly is scary, and I'm seeing both men and other horses being killed. But Comanche stayed there. Anyway, the assigned to Captain Miles Keogh of the 7th Cavalry, Comanche quickly became a favorite for his loyalty and toughness. On June 25th, 1876, the 7th Cavalry rode into the history at the Battle of Little Bighorn, also known as Custer's Last Stand. The entire unit of over 200 men under General Armstrong Custer were wiped out by, and I told you, the Indian tribes. When reinforcements finally arrived, they found nearly everyone dead except for one wounded but alive horse, and that's Comanche. And I mean, the picture you're looking at is certainly a good depiction of what it would have looked like when this battle was completed. Comanche had been shot several times, bleeding and weak, but he had stayed near the falling soldiers instead of running away. And I don't think any of us would have felt that if Comanche had, when he's facing what we're looking at, to say, you know, I certainly did my best. I certainly didn't cause this, and maybe I need to move on to the next job. But God bless him. He's just going to stay there. And thank goodness that, when the reinforcements showed up, they were able to, see that Comanche was still alive. He was carefully, and he should have been, nursed back to health and retired from battle. I think, let's face it, when you pay your dues, you pay your dues. And Comanche deserved to have a good life beyond this terrible battle. For the rest of his life, Comanche was given special honors. He was never ridden again. He was allowed to roam freely at Fort Riley in Kansas, and that's what you're looking at. So Comanche was there and was treated like a king of the fort here, and was well taken care of for the rest of his life. He took part in parades and ceremonies as a symbol of loyalty and survival. When Comanche died in 1891, by the way, as you know, I wasn't born then, he was given a military funeral with full honors. And I wouldn't expect less. One of the only horses in U.S. history to receive such treatment. And when I work to find good stories or historical accurate stories, and certainly my goal is that we learn from it, you learn from it, and we are able to recognize, in this case, a wonderful horse that was wonderful and loyal and deserved the best of the best. His preserved body is still on display at the University of Kansas Natural History Museum. Though overshadowed by Custer's dramatic defeat, Comanche's quiet endurance turned him into a symbol of resilience, a living witness to one of the most famous battles in American history. So, I hope you enjoyed this, as I always enjoy, doing these for you, and 2, learning more about things that I've studied throughout history, but didn't have all the little extra special parts of knowing all about Comanche. I mean, I know we often joke and you shouldn't joke, but when you say this, whenever something happens, you go, oh, this is just like Custer's Last Stand. They used it as a point of where we know that they died, but they didn't give up, but they died. That's all I basically knew. Now I can cherish the fact that we have Comanche as part of our history of wonderful animals. Anyway, thank you for being here. And again, I'm doing both channels. I have, Phoenix Animal, which is a pleasure. And as being a coffee roaster from the past and not starting coffee until approximately 2017, I'm also doing Power Coffee News, which is a separate channel, and I do hopefully things in there, because I studied coffee. When I started drinking coffee late in life, my wife talked me into it. I used to drink Diet Coke. I was like, wow, boy, have I been missing out in reference to good coffee and so on and so forth. So what I'm doing with the coffee channel is going through all the things that I learned, and I'm still learning. And the nice thing is I've been away from coffee a little bit, back in 2018 and so on and so forth, I studied coffee, everything I could get my hands on, the history of coffee, the fighting about coffee, and everything from A to Z. So it kind of gives me, besides the animal side, the coffee side of what I also enjoy doing. And in fact, I'm probably going to become another coffee roaster here, because I had my roastery over in Davie, Florida, which is just about 90 miles east, right across the southern Florida, over to the east coast. And by the way, they're probably having a little problem with Hurricane Aaron, not too much in the sense of wind, but storm surge. And the last thing I'll say, we worry about hurricanes. We're a little protected over here on storms that come from the Atlantic. Because remember, I was a generator company for 20 years, and I had to deal with all these hurricanes and so on and so forth. But when the storms are in the Atlantic and coming toward the U.S., because we're on the West Coast, it's a little bit of landmass, even though Florida is so flat. The storm doesn't get knocked down very much, but it still is a little bit removed from being over on that side of the state of Florida. But when the season gets into, let's say, September-ish, and certainly the peak of the season is in the middle of September, we start having storms that come up around Cuba, off of Mexico into the Gulf of Mexico. And obviously now the storms are on our side. And last year, we luckily missed a couple. We had some influences, but not where we had any real big damage or what have you. So, we just hope for everybody. We pray that everybody that's in any storm, fire, tornado, that we all do okay. So that's my best wishes to you. And thank you for being here. You make this all possible. And I'm just going to tell you, I love what I do. And I know it takes a while for people to get very interested in a particular channel or topics. But I love what I do. So it isn't even where I'm sitting there going, I better get something good or bad. No, I'm just having fun. I'm enjoying what I'm doing. I'm almost 76. And bottom line, I love the generator business. But in South Florida, I started having trouble with the heat. And unfortunately, every summer since 2014, so we're talking 10 years, every summer is hotter than the summer before. So I, unfortunately, being my age now, I just can't stay outside very long and work in this heat. But thank you for being here and letting me tell you the little side stories. But just think about how wonderful this horse Comanche was, and keep him in your prayers, because animals are so supportive and remarkable. Thank you again, and please take care.